Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is my review of Robot Carnival, an anime anthology film from 1987. Now, this is a 90-minute or so film that consists of 7 short films from different directors, an opening segment, and then an ending segment on top of that. Now, from what I remember, this is the first anime film that I ever saw in my entire life, and it's still one of my personal favorites to this day. I think I saw it for the first time back in like the 1990s, early 90s maybe, on the Sci-Fi Channel on a Saturday morning, I think. I just have that memory in my head. Now, obviously, I never saw anything like it before, and to be honest, it's hard to think of a lot of things that are like it even, 30 years later. So this one's kind of special to me. So let's briefly discuss each segment. I'm going to be a little vague to not give away any spoilers here. So we have the opening segment, and it begins in like a desert land where a young man sees a ripped poster of the Robot Carnival that's coming soon. And he freaks out, and he warns the nearby village that disaster is coming, and the carnival arrives. It's like a huge... If you ever saw the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it's like a huge technodrome, but it's, obviously different, but it runs on tank treads, dirt tracks, and it seems like a big celebration, like an event you'd want to go to, but the problem is that it destroys everything in its wake, so it's a very cool opening to this film. Then we get the first official short film, Frankenz Gears, which is kind of an homage to Frankenstein. Takes place in an old stone mansion, I think, with lots of laboratory equipment, and there's a crazy old scientist who attempts to animate a robot. It has kind of a classic horror vibe to it. It's good stuff. Then we have Deprive, which is a story about an army of robots who invade a city and abduct a girl, and a man-robot hybrid comes to her rescue. This is kind of an action-packed crowd pleaser of sorts. Has some pretty good fight scenes and stuff like that. Pretty entertaining stuff. Then we have Presence, which seems to be set in the early 20th century maybe, so you're kind of going back in time on this one. It's about a man who constructs a robot girl because he seems to be suffering from a lack of passion in his life or something like that. And this is essentially a drama romance with a very relaxing atmosphere to it, but it's also the most emotionally impactful short film out of the whole anthology, in my opinion. It has a very strong feel of melancholy. I really enjoyed this one. Then we have Starlight Angel, which takes place in a futuristic world with an active nightlife where everybody kind of parties at this big amusement park with high-tech rides. So we have a girl who loses a pendant and finds out that her boyfriend is cheating on her, and she meets a robot along the way. It all takes place in this amusement park. Probably my least favorite story of this anthology, but it's still good, which should tell you just how impressive this anthology is. Then we have Cloud, which is probably the most artistic and visually creative of this entire anthology. It feels like an experimental film that you'd see in an art museum or something like that. Really cool stuff, because the main character essentially is walking in place in the bottom corner of the screen, while all kinds of mesmerizing events are presented behind him as he's walking. So it's almost like it's like a story of his life experiences and its depiction of the passage of time, which is really neat. Then we have, listen to this title, Strange Tales of Meiji Machine Culture, Westerners' Invasion, also known as A Tale of Two Robots, Chapter 3, Foreign Invasion. So this is more of an action comedy that's set in the 19th century. I mean, you see how this anthology mixes things up? You have some artsy segments, you got some crowd-pleasing segments. That's what makes it so good here. This one is about 2 giant machines that are seemingly created from the technology of the 19th century. Pretty cool. And they kind of battle it out in the city and create tons of collateral damage. This is another one of those crowd pleasers that is purely entertaining and even a bit funny. And then the final, official short film is Chicken Man and Redneck, also known as Nightmare. Now this one is set in Tokyo, and a huge robot basically appears and uses lightning to kind of resurrect like giant barbed plants out of the ground, which like destroy buildings and start to, and almost like terraforms the city of Tokyo into a nightmarish robotic cityscape. It's freaking crazy. And he creates a little robotic minion who flies around on like a flying moped, and this little minion creates an army of murderous robots. And our main protagonist is a drunk who wakes up in an alleyway, and he's got to try to survive this whole thing. So this one has a lot of horrific imagery to it, and that's one of the reasons why it's probably my personal favorite of the entire anthology. And then we get the ending segment. We're back in the desert where the robot carnival drove through, and then the credits start to roll. So, I remember when I watched this back in the day, the ones that were the most memorable were the Nightmare one and the one before it, the Foreign Invasion one. Those are the ones that stuck in my mind the most from when I was a kid, okay? And Robot Carnival was one that I saw like one time way back in the day, and I hadn't seen it for like 15 years. And then I saw it again in the 2000s, like the late 2000s, on like YouTube. There were like clips of it, but they were incomplete because the DVD that was previously released went out of print and was really expensive. And then more recently, in the past handful of years, there's a new re-release of the DVD and possibly Blu-ray that's widely available, and it's also on streaming sites. So I figured it would be a good idea to rewatch it again for the third time and review it. And this is one that's just, I enjoyed every single segment, and again, it's one that I appreciate even more now than I used to. One thing you'll notice, surprisingly little dialogue in this entire anthology. I think of the 7 short films, 5 of them have no dialogue at all. And both the opening and the ending segments also have no dialogue. So basically 7 out of the 9 segments have no dialogue. And the storytelling is entirely visual in those particular shorts, which is really neat. It gives it a very unique viewing experience, and coupled with some of the impressive animation on display, it adds a level of artistry to it. The music in this is fantastic. It was composed by Joe Hisaishi and Isaku Fujita, the former of which is a legend in the industry. The music is very important in Robot Carnival, considering the presentation style and the lack of dialogue. It needs to assist the visuals in communicating emotion and mood, and the score is perfect for every short film. Really good stuff. It's actually, there's an official soundtrack that I saw that was available, and I might buy it. It's a little pricey, but this is a really good music score here. Now, some people, I read a few reviews before when I was kind of tweaking my write-up here, and there's only like a few YouTube reviews of this, and they both had problems with the story. Seems like people have a problem with the stories in this. But the thing is, they're not particularly deep or complex. Most of them are not particularly deep or complex. But they're short films, so I never really expect much from that anyways. I think that complaint is just kind of, it's the modern day moviegoer mentality. Everybody needs a traditional story and character development, and things need to make sense, and there needs to be logic on display, which I obviously do not need. I do not need that. It's nice to have that most of the time, but sometimes I just don't need it. And this is a case where I just don't care. Most of these short stories have a theme that's communicated or a conflict that's eventually resolved. And that's enough, given the restricted runtimes. These are pretty short runtimes here. And I would argue that a few of these short films are nuanced and complex. Specifically, Presence and Cloud. I think they both got some stuff going on there. And I think a lot of people misinterpret the ending of Presence. Misinterpret's maybe not exactly true. I think people take it a bit too literally. Let's put it that way. So, again, this is one of those anthologies that might challenge you a little bit in terms of your interpretations of certain things. But a lot of times it's not that confusing. And pretty linear. So, this is one that is definitely worth watching. And another fun fact is that the opening and closing segments were directed by Katsuhiro Otomo, who is most well known for directing Akira. So you have some talent here, too. So, hey, if you have not seen Robot Carnival, I highly recommend this. It's a lot of fun, and it's just so different from a lot of other stuff out there in terms of just animation. It's available on Amazon Streaming and some other websites, and also physical media in the United States. And as always, I'll see you next time.